Okay, vorher möchte ich mir einmal nochmal den Autopsie-Bericht angucken. Details of the victim. Corona currently thighs, okay. Details of the victim, name, ODS man, age 47, nationality British. Time of death 21st October around 2:20 p.m. Und cause of death hemorrhage of a wound to the chest that pierced the heart, inflicted by a sharp implement. Additional observations, a broken vertebra, also Nacken bzw. Genick, most likely resulting from an impact after a sudden fall from considerable height. Okay. Könnte die Wunde hiervon sein, von dem Crossbow? Vielleicht. A front of murder. The corpse that went crashing through the crystal tower had a broken neck. Warte, ich speichere mal kurz. Minor Miscalculation. Kurz zurückgehen. Ich speichere mal kurz, weil vielleicht können wir den Bogen jetzt schon sofort präsentieren. The corpse that went crashing through the crystal tower had a broken neck. I made a minor miscalculation in the angle of the beam projection, that's all. That was my mistake. But the post-mortem examination revealed another injury, a fatal wound. There was a lesion in his chest where it had clearly been stabbed by something sharp right in the heart. Hier präsentieren wir das mal. Objection! Okay, scheinbar nicht. The defense would have to object to that last statement, my lord. Okay, dann pressen wir doch erstmal. Das ist scheinbar der way to go. Ich dachte, ihr könnt mir ausnahmsweise mal sofort was präsentieren, aber scheinbar nicht. Also, the corpse that went crashing through the crystal tower had a broken neck. Hold it! Are you suggesting that's because he fell from a considerable height? Exactly, which highlights something else about this whole one business. What's that? The fact that the instantaneous kinesis itself was a success. Ah! After the explosion, the cage with the fella inside suddenly appeared out of nowhere in midair. So although the experiment ended in disaster, the so-called instantaneous kinesis did actually occur. Remind us, Professor, what was the cause of the fatal disaster? I made a minor miscalculation in the angle of the beam projection, that's all. That was my mistake. Hold it! So the angle of projection is critical, is it? And you calculated it yourself, personally. Absolutely. The calculation is far too complicated for anyone but me to carry out. Only, you got it wrong, didn't you? Yes, that's right. That's the point. The calculation is so complicated, even I can make a mistake. Do people fall for that brazen confidence? I should try it. I took into account the subject height and weight, the wind direction, the ambient temperature. I considered every possible variable, so I just don't understand how this could have happened. Obviously then, you had to include the weight of the clothes Mr. Assman was wearing at the time, I suppose. Ah! Crackling comments! The answer should have been there! So much for safety first. The 3 must be for safety third. But the post-mortem examination revealed another injury, a fatal wound. Hold it! Another fatal injury, you say? That doesn't make any sense. I didn't think I'd have to spell this out, but here we go. Just because there were 2 fatal wounds doesn't mean I'm saying the victim had 2 lives to lose, does it? Too right. Obviously, at first, we thought the bloke had died due to his spine snapping in half as well. But you're saying that's not the case? You'll get your answer once I finish my fish and chips, if you don't keep buttoning every few seconds. But we all know that's a bottomless bag. The victim plummeted 30 feet into a glass tower. It would be reasonable to assume that as a cause of death. Right, that's what we all thought, but it was a red herring, wasn't it? There was a lesion in his chest where he'd clearly been stabbed by something sharp right in the heart.
Hold it!
The defense knew nothing of this crucial information. The prosecution received this report from the forensic investigation team only this morning. That was the first we knew of it as well. I can only apologize for the impossibility of informing the defense. Sarcastic and insincere? Thanks. So, what was the nature of this sharp object? Among the accused tools that were in use at the demonstration, one is of particular interest. This. Oh, der Schraubenzieher! Den haben wir doch gesehen! Ah, yes, there would appear to be some kind of screwdriver, wouldn't it, Count? Ah! Yeah, there he is! My trusted little companion, Andrew! Andrew. Of course. Ah, do you know each other already? He's one of my dear friends, like all my tourists. I've named them all, you know? We are one big happy family. Eine glückliche Familie aus Werkzeugen, ja, moin. Andrew is my flathead screwdriver, of course. His brother Mikey is the crosshead. Well, it would appear that your beloved Andrew had a red stain on his shank. Ah, that isn't... It's blood, beyond all reasonable doubt. No. And that's not all. The long, sharp shape of this Andrew fellow is completely consistent with the victim's wound. What? Also war es doch nicht der Bogen. Order! Order! The court will enter this friend of the defendant as evidence. The screwdriver has been entered into the court record. Professor Harebraine's trusty screwdriver said he's named Andrew. There are traces of blood at the tip and it matches the shape of the victim's wound. So one of Professor Harebraine's tools is a murder weapon. Okay. Gucken wir uns das mal an. I've seen this unusually shaped handle before. It's the same screwdriver that was lodged in the grill on the floor of the kinesis machine. Which could be important information, so I should definitely make a note of it. The details of the screwdriver have been updated in the court record. A metal screwdriver that was found poking through the grill in the base of what remained of the kinesis machine. It has a very distinctive handle. Und Blut. This is blood. Mr. Assman's, no doubt. This is the problem with looking at murder weapons. Was? Okay, so one of Professor Harebraine's tools is the murder weapon. Great. So the victim was killed before he went anywhere, and this fella's the only one who could have done it.
Hold it!
What grounds do you have for saying that? Ha! Do you really need to ask? There were only 2 people on that public experimentation stage, in front of the whole crowd. The victim, Mr. O.D. Assman, and the accused, Professor Harebraine. And we know for certain that before the experiment, the victim was alive. That's right, I saw him with my own eyes. Furthermore, following the explosion and kinesis, nobody went anywhere near the body. In other words, only someone else on stage with the victim could possibly have done it. Gibt's ein Problem, Mr. Harebraine?
Excuse me!
Professor Harebraine, do you have some information that may be relevant here? Professor! Ah, sorry. I was just calculating the optimum coefficient of electrolysis to separate molecules in the human body. Optimus? Mein Gehirn kommt nicht mit. And the witness stand is the best place for that. It seems as though you might have something to say about Inspector Gregson's last remark. Ah! Aha! Ah! Yes, Yes, that's right, of course. He just said that nobody else could have done it, didn't he? Yeah, that's right. Who else could have stabbed the victim, eh? I don't know, but there's no way that I could possibly have stabbed Mr. Asman, as you say. Eh? Explain, please, Professor. Of course, this cold-hearted policeman may not be aware, I suppose. But humans are warm-blooded mammals with blood running continuously through the veins. I had heard. Then surely, you see, if I plunged something the size of Andrew into the man's chest, the whole stage would have been a bloodbath. No, a blood swimming pool. Ah, but thousands of Londoners were watching me at the time. And yet no one of them claims to have seen a swimming pool of blood. Okay. Yeah, true. But thousands of Londoners were watching at the time. Okay. Okay, yeah, true. Well, no, I suppose not. You see? Not one. True, I didn't see anything like that. Well done, Professor. That was a great counter-argument. Order! Order! Pray forgive the discourtesy if I savor a drop from my hello chalice to accompany my old friend seducing. Here's to you, Albert. Oh, you're too kind, Baroque. But I'm really not a patch on you. No, you're not. You've neglected to mention one crucial possibility. I have? A particular situation in which very little bleeding would result from a stab wound. Wenn es einfach in der Wunde gelassen wird, die Waffe, oder was? Ah, of course! Inspector, enlighten the court, please. Yes, sir! Where are they going with this? Very well. You will amend your formal testimony now, Inspector Grenzen. The weapon the victim was stabbed with must have been left in his body, whilst he was beamed through the air. Das ist faktisch falsch.
Objection!
Weil das ja bei der Maschine gefunden wurde. You say that while the weapon remains in the body, there's very little bleeding. Is that unequivocal? Unequivocal. Was war das nochmal? Unequivocal. Eindeutig. Okay. Look, there was no blood on the experimentation stage, even though that's where the fellow was stabbed. The only explanation for that is if the screwdriver was still in this body, stopping any heavy bleeding. It's common medical knowledge, my learned friend, even on your side of the word. Yes, but about the screwdriver. The thing is, we actually saw it at the scene ourselves, on the experimentation stage. What? It was on the floor by the wreckage of the machine, poking through a metal grill. I went to pick it up, but the detective here stopped me. Isn't that right, Inspector Grenzen? Ah, well, now you come to mention it. Yes. Inspector, are we to understand that you permitted the defense counsel to investigate? That you contravened the Special Dispensation for Scientific Equipment Act? No! No, not at all. I wouldn't do that. I just let him look, nothing more. I was very clear he wasn't to touch anything. Yes, that's true. This screwdriver was in plain sight on the stage. But it shouldn't have been, should it? What are you getting at? If this tool had still been in the victim's body when the victim was beamed away by the machine, then it shouldn't have still been on the stage. Ah! That's right. It should have been beamed across to the Crystal Tower along with Mr. Assman. And been found still lodged in the victim's chest. What? Order! Order! How do you explain this, Inspector? I don't. It looks as though everything that the victim had on his person moved with him when he was beamed. If the screwdriver was still in his chest when the instantaneous kinesis occurred. Obviously, that should have been beamed to the destination as well. This is a strange situation. Even though people are saying that this instantaneous kinesis is a scientific impossibility, we are still basing arguments on the assumption that it did actually take place. Finde ich aber auch irgendwie merkwürdig. Alright, time to tighten the screws here. My lord, if the prosecution is unable to explain this inconsistency in its argument, we can only conclude that the testimony given in support cannot be relied upon. Lord van Zieks ist stumped. Wer war das? Was war das? Okay, das war ein sehr kräftiges "Hold it!" Do you have something to say, witness? Yes, I know it. I knew it. It bears out. The equations hold. Mr. Naruhodo, don't worry. About what? Without delving into the details, there's no inconsistency. What? Even if Andrew had been lodged in Mr. Assman's chest, my trusty tool wouldn't have moved. Andrew remaining on the stage is consistent with my calculations. Wow. What? Macht dich das nicht selber schuldig, Albert? It would seem your illusions have been shattered. Clearly, we should hear the accused's explanation. Or should I say, this brilliant scientist's explanation. Just when I'd found an inconsistency in the prosecution's argument. Scientists? Very well, the defendant will testify again. Provide us with a scientific explanation as to why the inconsistency asserted by the defense fails to hold. In the name of Apollo, I will, my dear lord. Ohne dir. Witness testimony. The inconsistency explained. To be clear, I'm still at the stage of gathering data in my research. My hypothesis states the kinesis cannot transport metal though, hence the metal weapon would have stayed put. In other words, the point just raised by Mr. Naruhodo isn't an inconsistency at all. Mr. Assman was a patron of my research. Without him, my work wouldn't have been possible. Now I have a duty to protect the incredible machine that we built together. Also, es kann nicht Metall transportieren. Aber ich weiß nicht, ob sich bewusst ist, dass ihn das selbst schuldig dastehen lässt. So, the thrust of your testimony, Professor, is that based upon his hypothesis, metal objects cannot be moved by this method of instantaneous kinesis. In other words, since a screwdriver is made of metal, even if it's remained lodged in the victim's chest, its subsequent discovery on the stage, despite the victim being found elsewhere, is not an inconsistency. Okay. And therefore, Professor Albert Hairbrain could still have been the killer. My great hypothesis holds, you see? Scheint da unnormal glücklich drüber. We had to make the cage used to contain the subject from wood for that very reason. I was not addressing you, witness. Professor Hairbrain? Yes? Whose side are you on here? I don't take sides, Mr. Naruhodo. No, no, no. My only interest lies in upholding my hypothesis. I'm a scientist after all. Is he working for us or against us? It's very hard to tell. Let's see how you cross-examine this testimony, my Nipponese friend. Warte mal kurz. Ich will erst kurz mal das hier angucken, das Tatortfoto. Schade, ich hätte jetzt gedacht, dass wir hier irgendwie Metall drauf sehen. Aber tun wir scheinbar nicht. Schade, schade. Yes! Fire away, Mr. Naruhodo! Cross-examination. The inconsistency explained. To be clear, I'm still at the stage of gathering data in my research. Hold it! And yet you retort to my argument wasn't lacking in confidence in any way. No scientist can find the truth without first finding self-belief. Those were the words of a certain scientist I held in the very highest esteem. No scientist can find the truth without first finding self-belief. Much true auch für einen Lawyer, würde ich sagen, für einen Anwalt. Okay. But you realize that disproving my argument puts you in a very precarious position, don't you? No scientist should strive to protect himself more than he strives to protect the truth. More words of the same great scientist, you know? Words that are causing me a lot of trouble. Who is the scientist? I'm afraid I couldn't tell you, Mr. Naruhodo. But as soon as I remember the magnificent genius name, you'll be the first to know. Albert Einstein or was. It might be worth keeping the names of your idols to mind. You're wasting your breath, my learned friend. The scatterbrain even forgets my name at times. So Lord Van Dix really did have a friend once, but I didn't notice her freezing over. I mean, vielleicht doch nicht Albert Einstein, weil er zu der Zeit, glaube ich, noch nicht gelebt hat. Der war ja eher so zu der Zeit des Zweiten Weltkriegs aktiv. Van Dix really did have a friend once, but I didn't notice her freezing over. Oh man. My hypothesis states the kinesis cannot transport metal though. Hence the metal weapon would have stayed put. Hold it! Your hypothesis states it, so this isn't proven then. No, of course not. It's merely a hypothesis, but a good one, based upon thousands of calculations. But it is widely known that metals can't be decomposed by electrolysis. Yes, of course, so I am right. My hypothesis is clearly correct. What is it about incriminating themselves that makes this man so happy? It's the whole reason that the birdcage is made of wood, you see? Sorry? The birdcage? Yes, that's what I call the C. obtusa cage, in which Mr. Aspen was placed for the kinesis. Ah, the jail cell in which the victim was detained. It does indeed seem to be made of a timber of some sort. I thank you not to refer to it as an instrument of incarceration, your lordship. In short, any weapon lodged in the victim when he was beamed away by instantaneous kinesis would have been left behind on the stage if it was made of metal, correct? Yes, that's it! Yes! It all fits perfectly with the mathematical model. But the ultimate conclusion then is that the defendant alone had the opportunity to inflict a fatal injury on the victim, is it not? Ah, indeed, sir. Someone beam me out of this nightmare. In other words, the point just raised by Mr. Naruhodo isn't an inconsistency at all. Hold it! You seem to be pleased by that. Yes, another example of my hypothesis holding true. But I sense some sarcasm, Mr. Naruhodo. Are you not pleased? No. I knew it. At the end of the day, I'm the one responsible for Mr. Assman losing his life. The advancement of science is no excuse, I know that. No, you're quite right. Tell the court, did you have a close relationship with Mr. Assman? Oh, well, no, not really. I mean, I'd only met him 2 or 3 times. And we only ever discussed my hypothesis and the project. And the research grant, of course. Mr. Assman was a patron of my research. Without him, my work wouldn't have been possible. Hold it! How did you come to know Mr. Assman in the first place? A year ago now, a small provincial science journal published a little paper about my work. That's a scientific journal. Good gracious, I should need new spectacles. Dieses kleine Heftchen. Alles klar. Ich meine, wissenschaftliche Arbeiten, ne? Ich weiß es ja selber durch die Uni, ne? Kenne ich ja auch ein paar. Die sind schon auf DIN A4 in Mickey Mouse Schrift geschrieben teilweise, also in kleiner Schrift. Es geht noch kleiner, aber das ist schon relativ klein gehalten. Und dann da drin, solche kleine Schrift, das ist... Nee, da hätte ich keine Lust drauf. I might have had an extraordinary hypothesis and great promise, but at the time I had no money. I had to eat tiny little meals at a tiny little cafe and drink watered down water out of a tiny little glass. But Mr. Assman read the paper and came to visit me at my tiny little laboratory and offered your money to help fund your work. Exactly! That's exactly what happened. I handled the theoretical side of things and Mr. Assman provided me with an engineer for the practical. And the 3 of us produced that fantastic machine together. The machine that you brought to the great exhibition to demonstrate. We had to apply to the government for some sort of inspection to be allowed to exhibit, I think. I didn't understand all that side of things. Mr. Assman took care of all of it. He was a wonderful man, really. I owe him everything. Like I said, and Mr. me with an engineer for the practical machine that you brought to demonstrate. Okay. Now I have a duty to protect the incredible machine that we built together. Hold it! When you say that you built the machine together, does it mean that you were involved in its construction? Yes. Well, not exactly. I'm not good with the practical side of machines myself, so the physical construction was done by an engineer. Little remains of your creation now, though, following the explosion. Repair will no doubt be impossible. Yes, I realize that, but still. If someone were to gather all the broken parts, they could discover the secret of my hypothesis. But Mr. Assman and I toiled over that machine for so long. We put our hearts and souls into it. I have to protect our work. So what's left of the machine must be kept safe. That's only fair, because what happened was an accident. That's the extent of the testimony then. Thank goodness for that. I don't want him doing any more damage. He's already basically proven that he could have been the culprit. But it seems as though all he really cares about is defending his hypothesis. Still, I wonder, what if his hypothesis is just fundamentally flawed? To be clear, I'm still at the stage of gathering data on my research. My hypothesis states that kinesis cannot transport metal though, hence the metal in order stayed put. Ist dem wirklich so? Was man als Metall hier gelten lassen könnte, ist vielleicht die Brille, weil es ja Gold ist. Vielleicht als Edelmetall. I don't know. Ich bin mir unsicher, aber ich speichere mal kurz ab. Und dann gucken wir mal. save complete. Nice. Present.
Objection!
Okay. Professor Harebrained, you say that according to your hypothesis, nothing made of metal can be beamed by instantaneous kinesis using the machine you made. Is that right? Yes, that's right. Spot on. Exactly correct. In that case, I'd ask you to have a look at this photograph that was taken at the scene. In particular, I'd like you to pay attention to the victim's face. You can clearly see that Mr. Assman is wearing a pair of spectacles with a metal rim. What? Metal? No. Metal can't... That's not... Metal? No! We've already established that the proposed murder weapon, the screwdriver, was found on the stage. However, if your hypothesis correctly predicted that outcome, it should also have predicted that the metal rimmed spectacles would be found in the same place. Ah! My hypothesis! My hypothesis! Professor Harebrained, this isn't easy for me to say, but your hypothesis is clearly flawed. Ah! Nice! Wissenschaftlich widerlegt einfach. Order! 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 Council, what is the implication of this? If, on the day in question, the alleged instantaneous kinesis never actually took place, then it's entirely possible that the victim was killed somewhere other than on the stage. And in that case, someone other than the defendant could have been the culprit. But my hypothesis! My hypothesis is sound! I proved it that day. The experiment was a success. The experiment was proof of all my work. If I could say something here in my capacity as a fellow of the Royal Society. Yes, you are number 4? Go ahead. As a man of science, there's one thing I simply cannot abide. And that's a fraud who pretends to be a fellow man of science. What? Wait! Wait, Scott! Are you suggesting my science is suspect? It's just been disproved, hasn't it? In front of all of us. In other words, the whole demonstration was a complete nonsense from start to finish. Believe me, my fellow jurors, when I tell you that this man is a heel, a bounder and a fraud. I say the wreckage of that machine should be stripped down and thoroughly examined. No! Never! That machine is the essence of my entire hypothesis. It's protected by the Special Dispensation for Scientific Equipment Act. What the devil is that blasted act all about, eh? Who made up such a daft rule? I don't like the way this seems to be going. What's the best way for me to help the professor? Raise an objection, würde ich sagen?
Objection!
Professor Harebrained has yet to perfect his invention. That would seem to be the case, yes. But even so, what? Going to such trouble and expense to create a fake machine to display in public. He would have absolutely no reason to do such a thing.
Objection!
He had an obvious reason to do exactly that. For the research grant money. Ah! If the government was foolish enough to have deemed the man's ridiculous notion plausible, he and his conspirators would have received a handsome sum indeed. Conspirators? What would be the value of such a grant? 10 pounds? You're an order of magnitude out, madam. 500 pounds a year! Oh, aha! You could live handsome on that much for years. The society's noticed an increase in bogus public demonstration in the field of science recently. And plenty of scientists arguing with each other to get the largest slice of the funding cake. People's greed is plenty motive enough for murder, I assure you. No, no, no! I haven't deceived anyone, least of all the government. My hypothesis is sound, the science is sound. Please, you must believe me.
Objection!
No matter how unbelievable this hypothesis may seem to you, ladies and gentlemen, the fact remains that the victim was transported instantly to the Crystal Tower. Which means that the experiment was a success. Ah, Baroque! And therefore, the only person who could possibly have committed this murder is the accused. Ah, Baroque. Where is this heading? I have no idea. My lord, if I may. Yes, Lord von Zieks. The prosecution would like to summon new witnesses to the stand. New witnesses? What would be the nature of their involvement? They were spectators of the demonstration at the exhibition, who were occupying special seats. Eyewitnesses. Very well, the court grants the prosecution's request. I should very much like to hear from eyewitnesses to the incident. The prosecution's stance is clear. This experiment was no postige. The accused killed the financier victim there on the public stage, before the very eyes of the spectators. Now, my learned friend. Oh, yes? It's time for you to make your own stance clear. There's clearly a flaw in the professor's hypothesis. I can definitely see that. But where does it leave me? We shall take a short recess now, during which time the prosecution will prepare its new witnesses to take the stand. As you wish, my lord. Good. In that case, court is adjourned for 20 minutes. Okay. Pause. Und to be continued, als ob. Okay, das war ein kurzer Abschnitt. Naja, relativ kurz, über eine Stunde auch. Save your current progress. Okay. Also bisher haben wir gelernt, dass scheinbar, dass scheinbar jemand, dass die Hypothese von ihm falsch ist, weil Metall transportiert werden kann. Also muss ja das Messer oder der Schraubenzieher irgendwie rausgezogen worden sein oder so. Ich bin mir noch unsicher. Ich bin mal gespannt, wo sich das alles hinentwickelt. Aber soll es dann auch erstmal von dieser Aufnahmesession gewesen sein. Ja, nächste Aufnahmesession geht's weiter, nächsten Part geht's weiter und wir sehen uns beim nächsten Mal. Diesmal hat mir gar nicht ganz so viel zu sagen, weil die letzte Aufnahmesession war deutlich interessanter mit dem Apprentice und so. Jetzt geht's halt wirklich gerade nur um den Fall, was auch interessant ist. Ich bin gespannt, wie sich das aufklärt. Aber ich habe gerade nicht so viel zu sagen. Deswegen bedanke ich mich einfach fürs Zuschauen, bedanke mich fürs dabei sein und wir sehen uns dann im nächsten Part, in der nächsten Aufnahmesession wieder. Ciao, ciao, tschüss und ja, Einspruch würde ich sagen, ne?